another Facebook Live. Today we have a special guest. She is one of the most powerful women on Wall Street. She's also the CEO of Zelman Associates, which is a leading housing research firm. She's a highly respected thought leader within this space for housing, and she's made some bold calls. She called the top of the housing market in 2005. She called the bottom of the housing market in 2012. You've seen her on CNBC. You've seen her on Bloomberg. You've seen her all over the place. She's also the author, and we're going to be talking about this today, of Gimme Shelter. It is her story and lessons on how she learned and how she became, again, one of the most powerful women on Wall Street. Welcome, Ivy Zelman. Thank you for being here with us today. We also have Barry Habib with us. And before we get started, I do want to mention we will be giving away a signed copy of her book, Gimme Shelter, and we're also going to be giving away a signed copy of Barry's book as well. And to do this, what you're going to do, we're going to be drawing a live winner. So you have to be present on this call. We're going to post a link right now in the comment section. We'll pin it to the top. What you need to do is go there, enter your information, stay on the live call. After we get through the juiciness of today's call, we'll be calling a winner. And we'll go from there. Make sure that you tag your friends so that they get in on this action as well. And don't hesitate to put any questions in the comment section. We will be taking questions during this call as well. And now that we have the housekeeping out of the way, Ivy, thank you so much for tuning in with us today.
Well, thank you, Megan, and thank you for such a nice introduction. I want to take you on the road with me.
Hey, Ivy, it's really good. It's really good to be with you here. So we talk often, Ivy, and it's congratulations on your book launch. I was very grateful and proud that you showed me that in the manuscript. We've kind of did that with each other's books. We kind of helped each other out there. So I loved your book. I thought it was great. But I also read a report that you did recently, not too long ago, probably back in August, I believe, which was entitled Cradle to Grave. And that was it was a really interesting report. It was 46 pages long. And you did cite some potential concerns that you have in the housing market. You've also been in the media quite a bit, on Kramer, and there's been a lot of press that you've received lately. And you and I typically have seen things similarly. We do with those differences, but I think now you're starting to raise some flags, I think, and we want to flesh those out a little bit more about the housing market, and specifically that you feel there might be some oversupply coming. Would that be the right way to position it, Ivy?
Yes.
Good.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about that, Ivy. That we're in a housing market that I think by all accounts is red hot. It's a housing boom. We're seeing appreciation levels in the upper teens, depending on what measuring stick you use. It appears that almost 60% of transactions are still bid over ask, and multiple offers. It's still difficult to find a home. So let's understand a little bit more deeply where you see some of these potential red flags or canaries in the coal mine, whatever the terminology that you'd like to use, that are causing you some heartburn here.
Sure. And I think, I'd call them yellow flags just to put it in context. And I by no means think we're in a concerning part of the cycle that would be anything reminiscent to the great financial crisis. But what we're seeing is a red hot housing market that's really being fueled by both primary buyers and non-primary buyers. And so that really clouds our ability to understand sustainable, true demand on a longer term basis. So back to the Cradle to Grave report, what it really is a somewhat sobering outlook for the U.S. population and overall household growth of the United States. So from 2010 to 2020, household growth grew at the slowest level at 8.7% on record. And population growth grew at 7.4%, which was the second slowest on record behind the 1930s that grew at 7.3%. So when you kind of set the table and say, okay, well, what justifies incremental supply? Well, for every incremental household, theoretically, if you had a capacity utilization that was maxed out, for every incremental unit of demand, you'd have an incremental unit of supply. And so household growth is really the foundation to determine the need for supply. And then you add on top of that demolition, and you get to a number that we believe is much lower for normalized demand than I think the general consensus out there is. So if we think about households for the decade, we're going to average 1 million households, and then we'll add a few 100,000 for demolition. So you kind of look at 1.2 million, 1.3 million per annum.
So
And I
hold
think-
on, Abby. So that's the demand side.
Right.
So you feel that during the 2020s decade, that we will average about 1 million new household formations per year, correct?
Average. Mm-hmm.
On average. And that's really not too far off where we have been. Maybe it's been 1.3 million, 1.2 million, correct? I mean, it's been a little bit higher than that. So you see a decline of perhaps 20% in the amount of households formed. But we have to also contemplate the fact that homes don't last forever. So as they age, homes have to be either torn down, demolition comes into play. So how many homes do you think we lose in that area? About 100,000 or so?
No, we have about a few 100,000. So between 200,000 to 300,000. So in total, for using the million as sort of the basis for household growth, add a few 100,000. And then we look at, call it 900,000 of our total would be a normalized level for single family. And then the remaining, call it 360,000 sort of normalized for multifamily. And so when you look at the current level of homes that have been completed in the new home market, it's running pretty close to that 900,000 right now. And so when you look at the latest 12-month housing start numbers, you have 1.1 million, that's about 20% higher than our 900,000 in normalized demand. And so people,
but it's still a lot lower than even at the reduced level of household formations than what's required to keep equilibrium though, right? At the current pace.
well, the 1.1 million isn't. The 1.1 million would be above where normalized demand is.
I'm talking about when you add to that the demolition. So
Right, no, I've already factored that in. So the 900,000 already has the demolitions factored in. So we have the 1 million is for total households. Then we divide that to where we believe should be allocated single versus multi. And the 900,000 includes the piece of the few 100,000 between 200,000 to 300,000 for demolition replacement.
Okay, I got you now. Okay, sorry, but
Our big concern in the market is that the supply that's being ramped, and the best friend of the housing industry right now is they can't build it as fast as they'd like. So it's acting as a nice governor, because it would be like the amount of production that's coming. It's like I talk to builders and they're like, winter's coming. You should see the amount of specs in the ground and the communities that are coming. And we see it through the land grab as well as lot inflation. It's just gone total bonkers. So when you start to think about, why we're raising the flag, it's more of what's coming in the pipeline as opposed to what we see on the ground. And I think that, coupled with the amount of demand that has been fueled by these non-primary buyers that are also buying new residential construction that we can get into, but that's really the, I guess, big.
So, I mean, yeah, we see that a lot. We see like the authorized but not completed numbers are
Right.
huge. Okay, so we agree with you. We've been reporting on that as well. My question on this is, okay, so let's take it and say like the spigot's open. We've fixed the supply issues and we fixed the labor issues. Now, those are two big ifs. I don't see those alleviating themselves, especially on the labor side, for a very long time. Maybe the supply side, we get a miracle in the next year. I don't think it happens, but let's just say we get a miracle. And now the spigot's fully open at 100% full throttle. How many units are builders planning to build?
Well, I think right now the ramp and land grab, with the amount of land that they own and control, is up about 34% year over year. And that translates into future communities for builders that are coming soon over the course of, let's say, the next 12 months, ramping at a sort of high single-digit pace on overall. But think of that very concentrated in the Smile Sand States. And also think of that certain builders might be growing community count 40%. Some might be growing 5%. So all in, we're kind of looking at new community growth that's in the high single digits. How to translate that into what that will look like for housing starts. I think the market is probably operating closer to 1.5 million, 1.5 million at full throttle. If we were to let the supply chain bottlenecks all sort of just diminish and all the challenges, that ramp would equate to a significantly higher than what we see in single family starts right now.
I got you. Okay. So you know me, Ivy, one thing that I'm a math geek. Okay. And Megan will account for it, attest to that. I'm all about math and numbers. I'm very geeky when it comes to that. So just really quick in my brain, here's what's going on. Saying, okay, we know we can't be at full throttle. And we also know we can't be there for a long time. In my humble opinion, I shouldn't say we know. It is my thought that we can't get there for a long time. Should we get to full throttle, and let's say that's the case, then at 1.5 million supply with 1 million in demand, and I know it's lumpy, you have to, single families, I get you, okay, but let's say we are over supplying the market by 500,000 units. That means in a year, we'd have not enough supply for this current market. In 2 years, we might be close to equilibrium. In 3 years, even at this torrid pace, even with all the obstacles out of the way, we may be in a market that's become slightly sluggish. But we're nowhere near the 3.7 million units that were for sale in 2007. We got 1.2 million, 1.3 million units for sale today. And we've also got 12 to 13 million more households. So what I'm trying to say here is that I agree with you that there may be an imbalance in what's coming to the market versus the demand, but I think there is a backlog that has to be filled first before the market starts to reverse course. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it makes sense. So I would say we were probably on the same page. I do think what we're seeing right now is the builders are not just planning on building, call it 1.5 million at full throttle for 1 year. They've got land supply that extends out 3, 5, 7 years. And the challenge of the home building industry is that you have to be buying land today that's going to go into your theoretical factory in 23 that you're buying in 21 to 24. And it's a tough business because they have to underwrite land and make assumptions on what demand is going to look like, what pricing is going to look like, and having those assumptions and able to hit their required rates of return. It's not an easy business to predict when you have to be buying today for years coming. So I don't think you just get full throttle 1 year. You got this pipeline that's going to continue, and that's where you get problematic. And the amount of institutional capital that has decided that the resi asset class is the prettiest girl at the dance is fueling the land inflation. So we wrote a piece earlier this summer that was really a deep dive on the build for rent market. And in the prior 18 to 24 months, at the time of the publication, 60 billion predominantly unlevered capital has been publicly announced by institutional investors that they're going to pursue a strategy to build communities that are purposely built for rent. And
so I want to talk about that.
Just since that publication, it's now over 75 billion. So the amount of money chasing in a very concentrated part of the country is going to magnify the supply, because it's not just supply coming for sale homes, it's also for rent.
So Ivy, let's talk about that, because there's a lot that I want to unpack here. There's so many areas. It's always so great to talk with you, Ivy. I know you and I, we wound up when we're on the phone together, which we do a lot. It's like a 5-minute call lasts for an hour because there's so many ways that we go with this. So let me try and get it organized here, because there was a lot of things. So first of all, Zillow getting out of the iBuyer business, and then the rise of the cash buyers going from 16% to 23%. Don't both of those speak to the fact that a lot of this is going to translate not into purchases for people like us, but that will go to apartments?
I'm not sure I follow in terms of apartments. How's your transition?
In other words, there'll be supply that it's brought on the market for rental as opposed to for purchase. In other words, the 23% cash buyer isn't just more people that made money in Bitcoin. Some of them are there. Some people have made money in stocks. Some are boomers that are aging, giving their kids cash to buy the home. I get all that, but I believe a certain portion of that is institutions who are purchasing those units and converting them to rental. And now the iBuyer unloading of inventory, I think probably goes towards rental as well.
Yeah, but you use the word apartment. Everything that's being developed is single family from these institutional investors. And there's a whole separate amount of development going on in multifamily in suburbia that's also been just off the charts booming. So, but when we just focus on single family and appreciate that capital that's building out full communities, that literally the box is the same box that's a mile up the street that the for sale builder is developing, maybe it doesn't have as many bells and whistles, but you're basically looking at prices for those rentals that are probably 20-30% higher than buying a home with an FHA mortgage. And I think that's the challenge, is that it's not affordable product that they're building. They're literally building the same box that's a few miles away, and it's, you know, $2,000 to $3,000 a month in rent. And it's almost like these developers, that whether they're for sale or for rent, they're actually under the assumption that there's price inelasticity. We could just raise rents forever because there's such a massive deficit, because that's what the NAR tells them, or that's what Freddie Mac tells them. So if you are a capital allocator and you're hearing from the world, well, I don't want to invest in hospitality, I don't want to invest in retail and office. You know what? Resi's got a massive deficit. We could just build out communities and all these bodies are going to show up. Where are all these bodies going to come from when we know household growth has been decelerating, unless they're going to be rented by people that are going to leave a multi-generational situation that has been accelerating, or people that are forced to live in mom and dad's basement, however you want to phrase it, but it's not affordable. So they're building not affordable product for rental. And right now it's working because there's only 6 billion of the, call it 75 billion that's been publicly announced now that's actually leased up. And so we just talked to a guy yesterday who's in Phoenix, and he's a built for rent operator, and he sold 2 communities. And we asked him, why did you sell the communities? He's like, because it's ridiculous pricing right now. These guys coming in that are paying up for this product don't really get the fundamental risk associated with rents getting to a ceiling that will not be, getting their returns if they're buying at these levels.
Yeah, this is topic for this. Sorry, Megan, this is topic for another discussion, but multiples have gone through the roof everywhere. It's insane. I mean, I've never could imagine. Sorry, Megan, didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Well, I was just going to say, Barry, you were on a call with David Rosenberg not too long ago as well, and you guys were talking about this rental demand. And even David Rosenberg was like, I don't know exactly where this rental demand is coming from. And Ivy, I wanted to get your take on where you think all this demand for rental is coming right now.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. So I don't know if you guys saw, but the Brookings Institute just put out a report that the Pew Research firm did a sample, admittedly small sample, but the move rate in the United States is actually declining, meaning that people that request from the post office an address change of address has actually been declining. So the number of people that moved over the course of the last 12 months is lower than the year prior, which is like sort of completely puzzling, because here we have what is assumed is this great American shuffle and everyone's moving. But to answer your question more specifically, Megan, if they're not getting a change of address, then maybe this is a temporary home that they're renting. Maybe they're actually waiting for their home that they're trying to get completed because the backlogs are so extended. Or they're looking at a market and they're saying, you know what, I'm in a densely populated city and I don't want to be in a densely populated city in an apartment. I'll go rent during this pandemic. And so I think you have transitory renters as opposed to permanent renters. You also have a lot of people that are renting that unfortunately aren't paying their rent because of what we had eviction moratorium. So we have what's called physical occupancy, which mitigates available occupancy for those that are paying rent. So you get artificially higher occupancy, which gives the operators stronger pricing power and more conviction that, hey, we can keep building it. Look at these metrics, they're off the charts. Blended rent growth in the single family rental market is at an all-time record level, with new rents that are being signed, new leases that are up in the mid-teens, and renewal rent growth that's in 8 to 10%.
Yeah, so we've been reporting on those numbers too, Ivy. It's astounding. It's no picnic to rent, certainly right now. And that's why, as an alternative to purchasing, we know all of the reasons why, it may be much of a detraction financially to rent unless prices go down. And that begs the question. So first of all, I have a couple of thoughts I've been trying to write down fast here, so I don't forget these things. So by the way, I'm not puzzled at all with the apartment demand. I'm sorry, with the non-move. You said people are moving less. I'm not puzzled at all. To me, it makes perfectly good sense, because you don't have to relocate for work as often. And then in addition to that, it's a freaking hassle. Who likes to move? It sucks unless you have to. And then the other thing is that we've seen prices rise so much so that it also becomes a bit prohibitive. And it's a difficult market to make the purchase. You're going to get outbid. You're going to have lack of inventory. So it isn't the screaming deals that are giving you incentive to move. Now, the other thought I had for you is with regards to, let's say if there is an imbalance coming, And if there is going to be some yellow flags out there, as you put it, or perhaps some fears that we should be thinking about. What I'm thinking about here is there really two markets? Because if the supply is coming to market with added expense and cost and bidding, then doesn't that mean that lower priced homes are still going to be scarce, and higher priced homes, perhaps that's the area where you see more of price concessions or less appreciation, or should we say this, prices come down even? Is there really two markets, Ivy?
I don't think so, because the way I see it is that where the builders, and we're going to call builders just generally both rent and for sale, just say the developers, they're concentrating where they're building predominantly in the more extremely suburban parts of the market. So if anything, they have to, because land prices are up so much, that they have, unfortunately, to build a box that's going to be more expensive, but it's still the entry level box. When you look at the publicly traded home builders, the median existing home price is now almost 400,000. Like, I think Horton's the lowest at 389. So if they can build a box that's between 300,000 to 400,000, that is your entry level buyer. And it's out, I jokingly call it, where the cows don't even want to live. I mean, they're way out in the hinterlands, but that's where the rental product is too.
But doesn't that mean that homes that are outside of that are, look, there's still a lot of homes out there in a lot of parts of the country that are under $400,000. And if homes that are going to be added to supply only come on the market above $400,000,
they're not coming on the market above 400. They're coming below 400.
Building homes for $250,000.
Building is whatever we're seeing getting developed. It's, call it in an entry level market. That's the entry level. Some markets you can still go to Humble, Texas, and buy homes in the twos, maybe not brand new, you can find them in the threes, but where there's new construction, say the equivalent is going to be the most entry level price point there can be for new construction. So
Okay.
What happens is and go back to your mobility comment, just to be clear, mobility has been under secular decline over the past 2 decades. And why is that? People have asked me that. Prior to COVID, when velocity of homes turning was sort of just slow and we weren't seeing very good existing home sale numbers, and people were like, why, with inventory so tight at record tight levels, how can we have housing kind of lackluster, with the exception of the entry level that was finally starting to react to builders building more construction in that third ring. And we saw home ownership rates that actually troughed in 16. In the last 5 years, we've been seeing the entry level has been really strong, fueled by millennials. And the reason why inventories were so tight and housing kind of move up buyers was lackluster is because we have an aging population. So when you get to a certain age, when you're in your 20s, 50% of people for the age of 20, 24 move in a given year. When you get to be my age, you have high single digit people will move in a given year because people tend to age in place. So we have an aging population that's hurting mobility. But back to your point, you're building.
I thought you were like 30, right? I thought you were like 30.
You're
Right?
so sweet. I'm gonna take you on the road with me if you think that.
No, but Ivy, hold on a second. So listen, I respect everything that you're saying. I do see it differently on the construction because I think profit's a big motive, and the bigger the ticket, the more the profit there is. I just don't see the supply in much of the areas that require supply on the lower end coming to the market. I still think it's going to be tough, but listen, it's okay that we see it a little bit different. That's healthy. Here's the real question. And I think the big one, and, spoiler alert, this is it, how much time do we have? How much runway do we have? Because this is what everybody needs to know, is that, do you see the market where we start to see prices come down? Forget, there's prices going up, then there's a deceleration in prices, and then there's actually prices coming down.
Right.
So prices,
I don't think we're going
decelerating's great.
Right. I think we're going to see more of an impact in 23. We probably have a year before we say we'd see price pressure or even prices go negative. In the new home market, we actually are forecasting a national 1% decline, as opposed to existing homes in 23, we have up 1%. But part of what our forecast is really predicated on is that interest rates don't change from here. So right now we're not bond guru experts like you are. I don't forecast mortgage rates, and God only knows whoever does, if they can get it right, 25% of the time, God bless us all, right?
We've done a lot better than 25%.
Well, in most papers, I say it. So let's just say whether you're Lacey Hunt, your friend and good friend, David Rosenberg, think that there's stagflation or deflation, and maybe the 10-year yield never goes higher. And the Fed is in quite a pickle, right? Dealing with now the risk that if they don't start tapering, all the things that we know. But let's just say our forecast is not predicated on any increase in mortgage rates. So if we get an increase in mortgage rates, then that accelerates the downturn of what will be a correction. And we're very concerned about rates going to as little as 3.75% or 4%, because there are so many people, thanks to Jay Powell's terrible policy, have been enabled them to refi. And now you have 67% of homeowners in the United States that are locked in below 4%. And just to give you some perspective, at the end of 18, 39% were locked in below 4%. And you guys may recall in 2018, we had the same problem, but it was 100 basis points higher. So we basically—
I have a lot of thoughts on all that stuff. So first of all, so if you think that, let's call the market 1% either way, let's call it flat in 23 for a second. So let's want to address these three topics one at a time together. Okay. So flat in 23, that's a pretty big call, because even if the market's flat in 23, buying today could still be a very good decision, because if you think between now and when the market flattens out, there's appreciation. Now, I think there's potentially double-digit appreciation. So if I were a buyer, I would advise a buyer today, even if we were to see. Now, we're forecasting a little bit higher for 23. So when we think it's going to be about 4% appreciation in 23 on existing, but let's just say that you're right and it's 1%. Then if you can make 10% today, and even if the 1% or even down 1% holds true, then it's smart to buy it today, because you get that lift.
I disagree with you, because we have 2022 up 3%, and this is a national number. Okay, so remember, when you get into the local markets where the pricing pressure and corrections are likely to be prevalent, are really going to be tied to where the markets are being supplied, under the premise that they can build forever. You know, if you build it, they will come, and have all of the supply pipeline. In markets where you don't have a lot of supply, I think you're going to see less severity, or maybe not even a correction, maybe more, mid-single digit price growth. So I think it's really going to go down to where is the supply the greatest, and in those markets, specifically in the entry level price points that you mentioned. You think more is going to be coming at a more expensive price. We just don't see that, because the builders are building the lowest square footage that they have in more than a decade. And they might have to actually build it a little bit higher in terms of ASP, because they can't get the return unless they raise it. And they're pushing the price increases to the consumer, because they're seeing massive price increases in land. And I'll tell you, the last time that when we got bearish, and we got bearish early, was a similar, they say Mark Twain says history doesn't repeat itself.
Rhymes.
But it rhymes at times. So what we're seeing right now is a euphoric market driving up land prices that's forcing builders to then pass it on to the consumer. And it's in that lower entry level opening price point. So I'm not sure why you think it's going to be higher priced homes, because we track 42% of the market, which is publicly traded builders, and we know what they're building. And we also track—
I was just making a comment based upon the fact that you said, if it's going to cost you $300,000 to $400,000 to buy a home, to build a home, and that land's being built up, then the supply that arrives on the market is
no. They're pricing it, they're building it to be in the 3 to 4s. They're not paying 3 to 4. That's what the end product.
Okay, so 3 to 4s. So if that's where the lowest price point of supply comes on the market, because that's the lowest place that you could bring a home to market. I think it's higher than that, by the way. The numbers that I'm looking at show that it's higher than that. But if you can bring a home to market for $300,000 to $400,000 to sell it, then if that's the lowest level, that means that you're not going to get anything underneath that. I think that supports home prices and home values. Remember, the median home price of homes that are existing in the United States is about $360,000 or $370,000, depending on what month you look at the data. So that means half of the United States market, half of it will not be seeing supply added to it. Half. So if you're going to be loading up the supply, fine, load it up in that tier, but it's going to be higher as well. If that's where all the supply is coming, then I'm just being logical here and saying, if you don't add any supply to the downside and you're going to get demolition, and you still got strong demand, relatively strong demand, that's got to be pretty well price supported. On the upper end or on the middle to upper end, that's where you're starting to see homes arrive on the marketplace in size. I think that that's where you probably would see, if there is going to be a correction, that area would see more supply, which would drive more of a correction. That's only my point there.
Yeah, I guess we're just starting to be on two different pages on it, because we have something called a GDI index, which we can get down to 2,300 micro markets. And we look at where the development's happening. And if you think about this GDI index, think of a 0 is where the cows don't want to live, and 100 is New York City. So when we look at where the development's happening for both rental and for sale, it's happening below 10 on that index. And we know that they're developing that far out because that's the only way to provide affordability. So that's the bulk of the.
I mean, if the cows don't want to live there, then how do you know you and I want to live there? I mean,
well, you and I don't want to live there, Barry, for sure. But that's, I think that the reality is that's the only way that they can buy land that's more affordable, that they can pencil their returns. It's the natural sprawl. You know, I remember moving to the Northern Virginia in '85, and my girlfriends were like, "Are you crazy? Near Dulles Airport? That's where like the Cowboys and Indians live." And now that's an A location. So this is sprawl. The builders and the developers create sprawl. They go out in Phoenix to Pinell County or Maricopa County, and they keep building and building out there, and rooftops lead. And then you get the commercial following. And that's just the natural course of this country. So that's what they're doing. They're developing further out because they have no other way to deliver product that they can get a return on, because the land prices are up so much.
Listen, I hear you. And that's just, you know, an item that I see your points. And I think they're really good points, by the way. But there's also desire to not want to leave and not want to go there. And people do want to, you know, still live more centralized in some cases. So listen, now we can go back and forth on, but here's the thing that I wanted to talk with you about was rates, and then how that leads into your comment about being locked in, because I've contemplated this a lot. I've given it a lot of thought because I hear so many people talking about it. And when I think about the math, this is what goes through my head. So first, let me tell you where I think rates are headed, and who knows if they'll get there. I think inflation pushes rates a little bit higher, but not too crazy. I think the stimulus does have an ephemeral effect. I think we see a slowdown probably in 2023 that keeps interest rates somewhat tame. In fact, I see recession-like conditions appearing in 23, maybe 24. So I think that interest rates may behave themselves. But let's just say if I'm a little off and interest rates don't behave themselves, I don't think they're going. I think there are deflationary pressures. You know, Kathy Woods has espoused a lot of these, but I think that there's reason to believe that aside from things like Lacey Hunt is talking about, or David Rosenberg, or we've talked about, where you see some deflationary pressures because of slowdown that could occur, there are also technological advances and things like that, which will constantly keep pricing pressures somewhat having some headwind. That said, the locked in comment that a lot of people have made, I want to think about this with you, because let's just say that you have reason to move because you desire a bigger home, a different school set, whatever it is, your desire is to upgrade. And let's just say that upgrade's $100,000. So that $100,000 is going to result in about $500 a month in increased payment. Now you have a lower payment and you're going to go to a higher payment, which is going to add another, let's just say $200 a month, because you're going to go 1% higher in rate. Okay. So I don't think either of those are unreasonable thought processes. So you $100,000 more home and 1% higher in rate. It's $800 a month. I don't think that's going to hold people back in this market. I think it's a car payment. It's less than a car payment for most people. It's less than a lease car payment for most people.
They're not factoring in that the new house they have to buy is going to be potentially, you know, up double digit as well. So the monthly payment, so the equity they've earned. Think, you know, you just look at history. We don't have to be theoretical about this because we have history to show us. So in 2018, we went from double digit home sales when year over year growth in early part of 18, when rates were a little over 4%. By the end of 18, rates got to over 5%, and new home sales proprietary, our survey results showed a double digit decline. Incentives went from being pretty much almost non-existent in 17 to on our 0 to 100 scale to almost at 70, and builders were cutting prices and the existing housing market was slowing. The same thing happened in 13 when we had our temper tantrum and rates rose. People get incentivized to move because they don't want to give up their low rate. So we have history that's had it happen. Where we're at a different level now, I hope you're right. we have a move rate in the United States. It's already under secular pressure. People are going to look at this. Okay, I have a locked in rate at 3% because I was smart enough to refi. And now rates are, call it, 3.75% or 4%. Do I really want to move? Maybe I'll just fix up my house. Maybe
but like I said, we could look at it in numerics. We could look at it to 3 to 4%, or we could look at it like I would prefer to look at it in real dollars for a real family. It's $800 a month to buy a home. That's $100,000.
And all I'm saying to you respectfully is that I hope you're right, but the history would say that it doesn't work.
But we're also seeing wage gains higher than they've been in 13 years by some metric, 20 years by other metric. We're seeing those gains probably continue. There's a lot of, it's difficult to compare historical data sometimes because there are other variables at play. It's like a Rubik's Cube. So yes, I agree with you, Ivy. I think that those data points need to be respected 100%. But when look, sometimes the best way to do it is to take yourself away from all the data, just put yourself into it and say, okay, look, it's $800 a month. Have you gone to shop? I was just in the city the other day. I don't know where all these people are finding this money. People like loaded up buying all kinds of crap in Prada stores and this and that, all these brand name stuff. None of this stuff is cheap. And where are they coming up with this money? Where's it happening?
You don't know? Thanks to our government.
Yeah, I understand.
And
then we're seeing job switchers and quit rates up. The numbers are misleading because they're not really quitting. They probably have another thing lined up. I don't know, Ivy. I think that for a family who is looking to make a move and desirous of making a move, $800 a month, in my humble opinion, may be a headwind for some, but for many, it's probably not that big of a headwind. So I don't know if I agree. The locked-in theory is definitely going to slow it down, but I don't think it puts the kibosh on, is what I'm trying to say.
I hope you're right.
Me too.
Can we shift gears a little bit? We've had a few comments talking about demand. And in that report that Barry was discussing earlier that you came out with, you talk about demand decreasing. And, Barry and I love to look at
decelerating, not declining.
Yeah, slowing down. I think you quoted
it's still growing, just growing at a decelerated level of growth.
Okay, well, you talk about demand decreasing, don't you, due to things like infertility and all of these other aspects as far as housing is related, correct?
I think she's saying that you'll see a slower level of demand. And when I think what Ivy talked about is the fertility rates going down, the births for women now below that magical 2.17 level that keeps you at neutral population, where I believe the births per women now is below 2 in the United States, right, Ivy?
Yeah, and I think it's 1.7. So we look at actual birth rates, which declined 5.5% this last decade. We're actually estimating that birth rates will decline 10% this decade. And I think when you look at population, you got 3 components: birth rates, immigration, and death rates. So one way we can solve this problem of potentially, the pipeline overbuilding is by having removing the cap on legal immigrants coming into the country, which is capped currently. And so if we actually have our legislators that on either side of the aisle can actually ever agree on anything, immigration is a great solution, but this is still not, at policy right now is not supportive yet of that coming to fruition. So Megan, we do see what's an interesting stat that we share in Cradle to Grave that I was just not necessarily blown away by, but remarkable just to provide some insights for you. Women are on this upward trajectory of pursuing a 4-year or higher education, whereas men are just going like this. And you know what, Megan, we don't want deadbeat guys that don't go to college. I mean, you can say whatever you want. People go to college to learn. You learn.
Wait a minute. Are we? Wait, maybe we're just smart enough. We don't need it.
Well, no, I think you do. Okay, unfortunately, the men are going the wrong way, and women are accelerating. And
don't say men are going the wrong way.
Barry,
it's data, Barry. You love data. You're a math guy, so listen.
Oh, I am a math guy, but I don't think men are going the wrong way here.
They're on education. They are. So we got men have a lot of problems. Not good to be a white Asian man right now. Let's face it.
All right. So first of all, you're not agreeing with me on this. And now you're saying men have a lot of problems and we're going the wrong way.
All right. Well, let me go back to
I thought you were my friend.
Go back to the women higher education and women that have completed a higher education. There is a 13% of women that have completed a 4-year degree are having children. Whereas women that have not completed more than high school, 53% have a child. So what we're seeing is just women that are waiting longer and then having a harder time getting pregnant. And when they do get pregnant, they're one and done plus, or they're choosing not to have children at all because they're pursuing their, career dreams. So I think that is part of the problem, Megan. And then we also have, unfortunately, because we have an aging population, we have more people dying, and we also have an opioid crisis where you probably read today, there was like over 100,000 deaths of people that have committed suicide in between the ages of 20 and 40. So there's really some problems on the death side, and we don't even extrapolate COVID. We kind of go back to pre-COVID death rates. So our population we're seeing a shrinking level of people under 35, very similar to Japan. And we see a aging population accelerating like Japan. The only difference between us and Japan is that we actually are favorable towards immigration. So I don't know, Megan, if that answers your questions, but I know.
Yeah, well, then there's one more point on that, Megan, that we would, I think you and I discussed this, and it was in your Cradle to Grave report, was that by 2030, I believe the number is that you believe that 46% of households between ages 25 and 49 will be no kid households. I thought that was pretty crazy. That's seems like a big number, right?
Based on what we're seeing right now in birth rates, it's going in that direction. And if we see that continues, I think that it's one of the sobering moments we have to face.
At what point in time, how far out is this going to affect demand on the housing market? Just strictly speaking of birth rates.
Well, I don't know that you can just look at birth rates, but if you wanted to say if population continues on this just, downward sloping level of growth, it's very negative for the outlook for housing over time. Again, that's why we need our legislators to be more in support of immigration. And hopefully our friend Dr. Roizen and Peter Linneman in the recent book that they now are pre-selling on Amazon, The Great Age Reboot, which I had the pleasure of reading. Albert Ratner is also a co-author. They think that people are going to live to 130, like the 130 is going to be the new, 50 or something, and we're all going to live longer. But nevertheless, if we continue to see our population dying off and it doesn't meet Dr. Roizen's expectations, immigration is really the only way to solve it, because I don't really see women turning around and incrementally starting to have more babies younger, because again, they're pursuing their higher education. That trend is sort of, directionally sort of a sea change. And I don't think it's going to change very quickly going back the other way.
Well, you say men are heading in the wrong direction, but the guys are really trying to support the population for the future better, right?
Oh my gosh, Barry, get out of here.
So guys, no, we do have to kind of bring this to a close. So Megan, I just want to talk just some final thoughts here from you guys.
Yes. So for starters, if you guys haven't clicked that link yet, we will be doing the book giveaway here in a second. We're going to get some Q&A. Ivy, I would love to hear a little bit about, we were talking about women and birth rates and career. They're doing their career now. Well, Ivy, you've done it all. You have kids, you have this amazing career, and you really share this story throughout your book. And I want you to tell us a little bit about, what this book is about. And one thing that I really kind of connected with is, you really get into your story here. So Ivy initially started going to college to get her accounting degree. And she realized, like many of us, through all the education and getting out there, that, oh man, this is not exactly what I want to be doing with my life. And you took that really vulnerable, courageous position of putting yourself out there and doing whatever you had to make things work and make it happen. And through that discovery, you really found where you wanted to be at in life and what you wanted to be doing and what really fit who you are. And for anyone that's kind of listening right now that may be struggling with that, struggling with finding what their purpose is, their passion is, or, struggling taking that leap forward to going off on their own, I just want you to share with us maybe some words of wisdom that you've learned and shared through your own story in this book.
Yeah, and I want to just say, I read the book. I read it before it came out. You were kind enough to share it with me. I told you, I love the book. I thought it was.
I'm getting someone trying to FaceTime me. Sorry about that.
They're calling to order the book because we said it was so good. So Ivy, really, I loved the book. I loved your story. I loved how you really had to overcome so many obstacles. But I really loved the approach that you took. You really took the high road in these cases. And I love the fact that you were really candid and you called the slime balls out there out, and you were also, you really showed a great pathway forward. So I apologize. I just wanted to say how much I love the book. So I know Megan asked you a great question there.
Well, I first would say that everybody wants to find their purpose. And Megan, you made it sound like it was, relatively, I don't know, easy, but I would just say that one lesson I have to share is that, young people today, there's so much stress of trying to figure out what they're going to do when they're a freshman. People are like, you need to get an internship, you need to go to the field you're interested in. And I just want to say that, most of us on this phone would agree, your first job won't be your last job, and that, you're going to have ups and downs. But I think asking for help and be willing to be vulnerable, to your point, Megan, was really part of the lessons I wanted to convey. And not coming from a traditional background, a Wall Street professional, a non-Ivy leaguer. I went to night school to put myself through my 4-year degree, and working hard and watching and asking everyone I'd interact with, tell me what you do. Do you like what you do? Are you, fulfilled? Is this the career path that you expected? And just being inquisitive and be willing to ask for help. I speak at universities, and in many cases lately virtually, but when I was speaking at my daughter's high school or speaking at my son's high school, and then later I started speaking at colleges, it's really because I feel like that might be my purpose, is to pay it forward. And that's really what the book was inspired by. But when I speak to young people, and I'll say to them, and by the way, the book, I have a lot of people that have incredible careers, and just hearing about a career path and the turns and the bumps you run into, those people are like, God, I remember my career, and they start having their own memory lane issues and thinking about the hurdles they had to overcome. But I do think that young people today, I'll say, if you're interested in Wall Street, reach out to me, email me. And my husband would say, are you out of your mind? You know how many kids are going to call you? And I get one email. And it's just amazing how many people are reluctant to be vulnerable and ask for help. So that's something I really emphasize in the book, is that networking and the importance of asking people to, and in any way, whether it be your parents' friends or you have children today that are looking for an internship, it's okay to reach out to your aunts and your uncles and your parents' friends, ask people for help. And that's part of what really inspired it.
Well, Ivy, I got to tell you, this was, in my opinion, just a great talk. As always, I always learn from you when I speak with you, and I've really, I love our friendship, and I love you, and I think you're brilliant. And even though we don't see everything perfectly the same way sometimes, I think that's great and that's healthy.
That's healthy for us.
Right?
I absolutely love your guys' energy. Just enjoy watching it, as I'm sure everyone on the live has. And you guys, we have to give away some free books right now, some free autographed books. So get this. Thank you to everyone tuning in. We have had on average 400 people during this live, and we've had 217 people submit their information to win this book. So amazing. Thank you guys. I'm going to let you guys pick a number between 1 and 24. That's how many pages we have of people's contact information.
I think that it should be a woman that does it, because they clearly on the right path with higher education, so capable of doing it.
All right, I got a winner then. I'm ready to call one.
Do it.
We got Brandy Heath. Brandy Heath, you are our lucky winner. Stay tuned for my phone call, because I will be needing your mailing address, Brandy Heath. But congratulations, and thank you everyone that tuned in today. Even if you didn't win the book, we will put the book link below. You guys will send out an email follow-up where you guys can receive that book. And make sure that you stay up to date with our Facebook Live. And thank you, Ivy, and thank you, Barry, for providing such wonderful value today.
We love you guys. And thank you so much for all of our family of subscribers. We really appreciate you. We do this for you, and we hope that we provide value for you every day.
Thanks, guys. Have a great holiday. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.